All right. So I know that some people have some questions. Just show of hands. Do you guys want to do some questions now or after this presentation? And then just after that, we'll do, a non-stop Q&A, just chatting ideas. Do you want to do some questions now or do it all later in one session? Later, all one session? Okay, sounds good. So I want to share with you guys a little bit in the next half hour, 45 minutes. Honestly, a lot of people ask, well, okay, George, so how did you learn some of that stuff? And I'll tell you, you know what, I have no clue how I learned a lot of stuff other than the fact that when you allow yourself to be put in God's field with some beautiful godly men who serve as your mentors, okay, across the world, and honestly, you try to learn from a lot of different people. You would meet great people in your life and you'd learn from them and just pick from them. And I was so blessed in one thing in my life is that I've met some amazing people throughout my whole life. The first time I went to the mission field was 1991. I was in third year med school at that time. And I went to Kenya, and I spent in Kenya about 4 months as a med student there with Tunis Morris. He was, at that time was Tunis Morris. And then I came back, and I knew Morris actually when he was still a lay person. And I got the privilege of meeting some beautiful people throughout my life. When he was actually a lay person also. He was my Sunday school teacher at some point. So I've learned, I was born in England, I grew up in England, and I went back to Egypt. So I got the blessings of both the church and immigration as well as the church in Egypt. And got to kind of learn from both worlds and learn that both worlds are amazing when they coexist in their power. So I want to give you a little bit of idea about, the kingdom of God in its actuality. Okay, so just a quote that I was listening to an online show called apologetics.com, and I don't know if you guys heard it, but one of the quotes that he said, which actually I thought was very pertinent to this, is that a probability becomes an actuality when actual people transfer it. So always there are probabilities, but it becomes an actuality when real people, it takes real people to do that. So we have to do what is probable for it to become actual. And I'm going to give you some sense of what has been the Coptic church mission across the world. A couple of people were in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. We had a beautiful conference, which was kind of the first conference for us to brainstorm about the Coptic medical mission in the United States as well as abroad. And I gave part of this talk, and I'm going to actually share with you more in a relaxed fashion a lot of stories, because that's the fun part, is the stories and the experience itself. When you look at actually the Coptic hospitals, and by all means this is not an exhaustive list of what the Coptic church is doing, because there are many people across the world who go as groups, partly of their own church. Here I'm talking about more what's kind of organized. These are people who are organized, have arranged this, they have a mission hospital, a mission clinic. As well, I'm not going to talk about Egypt. Egypt could take by itself almost like a full day to talk about the mission in Egypt. But we'll focus primarily at places outside of Egypt. So Coptic hospitals and clinics, and all these, I'm trying also to give you an idea, not necessarily as to run through the list, as much as to give you a sense of the possibilities, of what you can do. Because as I said, it's a probability. You have a passion in your heart. And I want at the end of this session, and at the end of this retreat, to transfer that probability to an actuality. Okay? That you guys will actually go and do something. The mission in Kenya, as you probably already know, started almost about 25, 30 years ago with Tunis Morris when he went there, and after that Morris took over from about maybe the second half of the 90s. And they've had a small hospital that actually started about maybe 15 years ago. And just this year they opened a new, almost 8-floor hospital. It's really beautiful. And we got the blessing as part of the team that went there in November. It was amazing for me because when I went there in 1991, literally in where I was staying in that retreat, you could open the window and monkeys would jump into your room. Like if you just left anything, you left any food unattended, okay? Monkeys would just come in and take your food. They'll mess around with your bag. So they also never leave anything outside because they're all over the place. At this point, because of the the civilization and the urbanization of this place, monkeys have gone, sadly. But the hospital over there is amazing because, first of all, it is staffed by about 12 to 14 Coptic physicians. Those are the true missionaries. Those are absolutely the true missionaries. They live there with their families. Their kids go to school there. Some of them have been there for about 10 years. They're living, serving, working there. And they're just amazing in how they offer the service. They use consultation from other places. The hospital over there has an attached to it HIV center that is funded by the American government. It's funded actually by the CDC. And it cares for about 15,000 HIV patients, even more. Out of those 15,000, about 3,000 to 4,000 are HIV kids. A lot of them are orphans. Talk about service. It's amazing. They've been blessed to actually take that model called the Hope Center and do small Hope Centers in Tanzania as well as in Zambia. And they've transferred that model. It's a very comprehensive model. And it's amazing when you go and see this hospital right now, and you know, when we were there, Saida was waiting for us, the Americans, just to kind of open the new hospital. You know, they didn't need us, but it was kind of just the psychological push to start the OR. And when we went there, you know, one of the med students, Kiko, he was with us. He's from Nashville, and he had a great time during that stay. They basically, if any one of you, anytime throughout the year, wants to go and serve, that's the place to go. Okay? Because they've got clinical services going all throughout the time. They've got spiritual services going all throughout the time. One of the biggest advantages over there is that their spiritual service is really second to none. And they emphasize that very much. Like when you go there, no matter what you do, you have to serve spiritual, because they believe that for you, you are a healer, you have to be spiritually served and served. Okay? There's also over there, the language is actually really easy because a lot of them speak English, and all of them speak English in Nairobi, and even when you go to the villages, okay, you'll find a lot of people speaking English. So the language barrier, especially like with Bolivia, may be a bit hard. In Kenya, it's very, very easy. There's great accommodation. So I would tell you, you know, Kenya is a prime place for any one of you who wants to serve even for an extended period of time. There are about maybe 10 to 15 people, you know, youth from around the world who are serving there for a full year. Second is in Zambia. Zambia has a smaller hospital, has about maybe 7 to 8 Coptic physicians who are also residing, primarily OBGYN, surgery, pediatrics, and medical, general medicine. They also have the HIV clinic there. Tanzania has a couple of spots. Right at the border, there's a place called Misoma, which has a small Coptic hospital. It's kind of been struggling a little bit to staff. So it is, you know, sometimes it has staff, sometimes it doesn't, but for most part, it does offer full services in terms of medicine and pediatrics. You know, Mike and Ann were with me right in this spot there, called Kigoma. It's on the borders with Burundi, which is, you know, it's as remote as you can get to the jungle, where you actually literally, when we ran out of water, we had to go down to a water stream just to get up some water and fill the tanks and take a shower. So it was great. Many of you have been to Bolivia this summer. It was a beautiful, blessed trip. Mba Yusuf, if any one of you has met him, knows how beautiful of a heart he has. He's got a small clinic. You can see this clinic over here. The beauty about this guy is that when he does something, he does it really nice. He does it really nice. It is up to standard. It's very well done, very well organized. And in this clinic, primarily, it has examination rooms. When we had our first trip, you know, only the so George could do his dental examinations here, and most of the medical specialties could do just clinical examination. But for most part, we had to go to other hospitals, the University Hospital and other nonprofit hospitals, to do our work. He is already building, or actually will start building, a second floor on top of this that would have procedure rooms. He is about maybe 10, 15 years behind Mbabulus in Kenya. But just looking at the future, would be a great site for us to practice and work and serve God in. Plenty of work to be done there. For those of you who don't know, but in Sudan actually also has a mission hospital. It's called St. Mark Hospital. It is struggling financially to gather finances to build it. Okay, but they're also, I think, one of the most important things about what they're doing is that they are offering medical care for South Sudan, which is just a war-ravaged area. You just heard of the you know, upheaval of the last couple of weeks, where it's just been the civil wars breaking out again there, which is very sad, because most of these places have a very, very heavy Christian predominance. Last but not least, Abuna Dawood Lam'i, God bless his heart, you know, he started this whole medical missions within Africa, they're still struggling to understand a little bit what are they trying to do, because mostly it's actually going to places where there's no existence of the Coptic Church. So I think they're pioneering in that. Like, for example, as I'll come and talk about Ethiopia, we entered Ethiopia as kind of the Coptic mission in Ethiopia based on the medical service. Same thing in Burundi. If you know Burundi, Burundi is like from the the poorest 5 countries in the world. It was part of Rwanda, Burundi and Rwanda, and then it split, part of the Rwandan genocide. So they built a small hospital in there that has basically just a very, very small OR, as well as there are 4 physicians that are living there completely in Burundi to start a service. So those are actually the hospitals / clinics / centers in the Coptic that we have in our world, and more to come. In terms of medical societies, and as I said before, that I don't think this is an exhaustive list, but this is at least what my research has led me, to find. We have our medical association, which I'll talk about. The Coptic Medical Society in the UK is probably the oldest in terms of the medical societies that has been out there. Their primary focus is the medical group in the UK. They're not that much involved in the mission work, although there are some members of them that as individuals are coming. One of the most exciting things is that for the younger generation, they are actually joining us more and more right now, because they're starting to realize that the older generation is not doing anything. So they're joining. We've had several physicians come from the UK. This is the Coptic Medical Mission Group, which is run by Abuna Dawood Lemay. And as I said, they're right now they've got medical services in Ethiopia and in Burundi, but they're hoping to open up Angola, Ghana, Namibia very soon. Okay, so it's really exciting because you're really seeing from several levels coming in. So what about the organization? So all of you came to the Semana retreat, okay, the Coptic Medical Association Student Retreat. So let's go back a little bit in history and talk about where did this idea came from. So the idea started about 2008, 2009, and honestly, it came in the same time where several of us who came from Egypt in the mid to late 90s and started to realize, okay, you know what, we got it all. We started realizing something is missing, partly because when you're in Egypt, when people are serving, they get that sense of blessing. And we're like, you know what, I can't find that blessing. So we came along, and God bless Abuna Dawood. He was actually one of the people who kind of said, like, you know what, hey guys, why don't you make this association? So it is currently, we have about almost 600 healthcare professionals in North America. And this spans physicians, dentists, pharmacists, physical therapists, physician assistants across the board, okay? We have these names, but unfortunately, if you really realistically look at this 600, about maybe 30 to 40 of them are the ones who are active, okay, or the ones who have been participating. So we're still not penetrating to everyone where we can actually vision. I was talking to some of the leaders of you guys earlier, said, you know what, if we vision really our society in 10 to 15 years, like Doctors Without Borders, like World Vision, okay, because the amount of talent that we have as a society is second to none. I was giving this actually note because I was talking about you guys. I was bragging about the student chapter a couple of weeks ago in Chicago. I was saying, you know what, the students have actually done a far better job than any of us as professionals. So why missions? Why missions? And I think the first thing that we started with is that, you know what, we were looking for a blessing. We felt that in our current job, we were missing something. Something was lacking. And based on everything that I told you as a Christian healer, we wanted to get that sense that we felt everyone in Egypt has, and we didn't. We were looking to work together because, and I'll share this with you, a lot of people within the Coptic Church have this stigma that Copts cannot work together. They always fight. But that's not true. That is absolutely not true. In fact, we have been surprised about how wonderful the relationship and how wonderful the friendship that we've developed over these years together as physicians. And not just physicians, but actually across even specialties. Physicians with students. And these friendships develop. Why? Because people have similar passion. And they come together within that. It started strictly medical, actually. When we started, it was absolutely medical. But you know what? This is the beauty about when God teaches us. Like, you know what? You think you're a provider, you're a healer, you're a physician, you're a dentist. Just let yourself to God. See what God would do for you. And very, very quickly, the spiritual part of the service became more predominant. And I'll give you some examples how that happened. Initially, we were planning to serve, we started primarily to go to Egypt. And I always tell people that, you know what? When we say that the Word of God is a living Word, when we say that the Bible is a living Bible, you have to trust that. So we experienced the same exact thing 2,000 years ago when the disciples were in Judea. They took it to heart, go to Judea first, Samaria. They were not ready yet for the whole world. What happened? Persecution happened. The pre-destruction era of Jerusalem until Jerusalem was destroyed. But at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, everyone spread out. That's how Christianity spread out. Well, guess what? This happened the same thing again. We were planning to go to Egypt, and Egypt can take a lot of our effort. And we went to Egypt several times. Okay, with several actually. It's great to meet people here who actually, I know their fathers and mothers who actually worked with us. So, we went to Egypt a couple of times. Until the revolution happened. And persecution happened. And then the famous story that happened is that we were planning to go to Egypt in November, the year of the revolution happened, 2011. So we go to Upper Egypt in Samalut, if anyone knows where this is. There's a beautiful mission hospital in Samalut, which is actually one of the best places to work in. So we call Sayyidina Babivnotius, and several of you have heard this before, but we call him like, Sayyidina, we're coming in November. I was like, no, you're not. It's like, why, Sayyidina, we're ready. We don't care about the revolution. We don't care. You know what? Okay? We're just kind of sacrificing because we want to serve. So Sayyidina says, no, you're not. This was August. So he says at that time, here's the reality of the situation. Down there in Samalut, at that time, they were kidnapping people and asking for a ransom for them to return them back. And the average guy who's a non-Christian, okay, they were asking about 250,000 Egyptian pounds for their head. So he said to us exactly this is the word verbatim. Okay, he said, you know what? So you guys are Copts. You guys have an American passport. You guys are physicians. Okay, they're not going to ask less than 1 million Egyptian pounds for each one of you. And then انتوا كده بالسلامه كده تقولي كده في فان, okay? All right? 10 منكم كده. That van is worth 10 million Egyptian pounds. And the reality, because it's a small, it's a small community. People know. People absolutely know. And he said, you know what? I don't have that money to pay for you. And we got very desperate at that time in August of 2011 because, okay, where are we going to go? And everyone was just canceled. Okay, خلاص, we're not going anywhere. And then we got this phone call from one of the ulama saying, by the way, the Pope wants you guys to go to Ethiopia. Seriously? The Pope wants us? How does the Pope even know? It's like, well, it happened that the Pope actually, at that time, Pope Shenouda and Patriarch Paulus, who was the Patriarch of Ethiopia, they were starting to have that, relationship coming back again. And Pope Shenouda asked Patriarch Paulus at that time, what can we offer in terms of service? And he said, you know what, we absolutely need doctors. The situation over there is so bad. If you can imagine Ethiopia has 80 million, almost the size of Egypt. And those 80 million have 3 ENT doctors, over 80 million. Have 2 or 3 orthopedic doctors. Wow. Heart doctors have got only 6 or 7. That's it. That's it. The system is absolutely desperate. People say, well, how are people living there? I was like, well, they don't live. If you are actually, and then I'll show you some pictures, because some of the most amazing things, they have to believe that sometimes God has that providence of looking out for somebody. You have to believe that. When you get sick, let's say in one of the villages in Ethiopia, and they have a provider that just screens people. They send a letter to the health ministry, and the health ministry tells them, your appointment is in the university hospital in Addis Ababa after 9 months. Okay, either you make it survival for the fittest. Okay, either you survive for those 9 months until you make it to the university in 9 months, or not. And then when you make it to the university, they might or might not have the treatment needed for you. If they have it, they'll give it to you. If they don't, they'll keep you there for 2 weeks, just babysit you, and then send you home to die. That's how sad it is. And we felt at that time when we went, it's we didn't really know what we were going into, because Abu Dawood said at that time, we're having a hard time as a Coptic community to serve our Ethiopian brothers and sisters. And we want you guys to be the entrance. It's wow. Wow. Talk about God using our weakness to His glory. And that was it. And you know what? And at that end, this was we had 6 or 7 trips to Ethiopia. It's been the most blessed place to serve. So far from 2009, since we started these organized, and these, by the way, and I'm not saying that these are the only trips, because there are thousands of other doctors, dentists, pharmacists who make trips to these places, but these are the organized trips across the country, even across the globe, and I will see some information about that. But 3 times it went to Egypt, 4 times to Ethiopia, 2 times to Bolivia, 2 times to Kenya. The estimated budget of what was donated in terms of equipment and medication is almost more than $500,000. What have we learned? The first thing is that we've learned that actually God really works through us. Because when you get healthcare professionals, pharmacists, dentists, physicians, physician assistants, and you put them all together in one room, they butt head all the time. We're some of the most egomaniac people they ever find in your life. If you don't kind of feed my ego, it's like I feel there's something wrong there. So try to put them all into one group to kind of actually, you know what, professor, exactly. That's my, and by the way, you guys are all calling me George, but my title is actually professor. In Tanzania, you know, when Mbabus was introducing us, it's like, Professor George. It's like, sure. And knows this very well. But try to get them in that room to actually work together. It is amazing that you would see that people from across the globe, these are the countries that Coptic people came from for one mission. Look at that. From Canada, from the US, from the UK, from Ethiopia, from Australia, from Egypt, and from Kuwait. That's how amazing it is, okay, where you get these people actually, and you know what? You get non-believers, you get non-Copts who don't believe in Jesus Christ, who come and join you, and all of a sudden they see how you're serving and you're glorifying God and how you are a Christian healer, and they look at you and say, you know what? This is not just a professional work you're doing. No, there's something different. You have a chance to bring with you any person, as long as they are willing to serve within a church context. The reality is that we've learned through a lot to how to work together, and I'll tell you one famous story. When we went to Egypt a couple of times, you know, Egypt, and I know this is recorded, but I'll be very politically correct. Egypt is a bit hard when you serve there, partly because of sensitivities, okay? Because people over there get sensitive when somebody comes from the US or Canada to offer their services, and they say, as if we don't have these services. Because over there in Egypt, the physicians are extremely skilled, extremely skilled, okay? The only thing that differs than you is that actually you have some free time to go that week, but not even equipment, because actually they have most of the equipment that you would need. Okay? The only thing is that over there, they don't take a week out of their time to say, I'm going to serve. They serve God every day. So actually, it would be foolish from us to think that we're going to really add a ton. And I remember one time we went to a medical physician conference, and literally the crowd, who are Egyptian doctors, pharmacists, and dentists, stood up and yelling at us like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And one of them had the guts to say, like, you know what? We don't need you here. We just need your money. Send us your money, okay? We don't need your... It's like, do you think we're not serving the people over here? You come and serve them for a week and you get a pat on your back. We're serving them all year long. And they're right. And they're right. So we have no reason to really, you know, feels like, oh, we're adding a whole lot. That time when we went to Egypt, we fought so hard with each other, you know, the Egyptian group and us. And at that time, the Abu Dawood was with us, like trying to calm down. It's like, you guys need to learn how to work together. It didn't take more than 1 year, and God was teaching us, you're fighting with each other? I'm going to force you to work with each other. So we ended up the year after going to Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, with our specialties, like let's say, for example, my specialty is cardiology, I started to realize very quickly that there are some things I don't really know. I have not dealt with these, partly in the United States. Although I trained, you know, I went to med school in Egypt, but I just came right after that to here. So for example, rheumatic heart disease doesn't exist in the United States. Okay, very prevalent in Egypt. And we knew going to Ethiopia, we will have a need for somebody to do mitral valve ballooning, because a lot of people have rheumatic heart disease. Their valve just closes, and they almost, like, you know, they can die from it. So you need somebody to go and do this procedure. I've done over my career of 10 years, maybe 5 of those, because we don't see it here in the United States. So God kind of made it that case, like, you know what, we were taking with us the stents doing coronary disease, and God sends us from Egypt this guy who does nothing but mitral valve. Nothing but that. He does about 300, 400 cases a year. And we team up together, and we work together. You get the pediatrician, who over there, the pediatrics, you don't see the usual stuff that people see over there. But you get the pediatrician from Egypt who's gone to Upper Egypt and he's seen it all. Okay? And God was forcing us to work together. And at that time, I was like, you know what? Humble yourself, and I'll teach you how to work, how to love each other. Then I tell you a story about this guy. It's a funny story. So this guy is a monk, Dir Berimino. He's like 31. Big guy, really big. And unlucky, he probably had like familial cholesterol problems, and he had a huge, massive heart attack, and he survived. And we were doing the echo on him, and we found that his heart is actually like almost working like a third of normal. So we started to talk to him as like, you know, Abuna, he's 31, he's pretty young. Like, you know, he's got a little bit of time to live. Which I was like, Abuna, you know what? You really need to have a defibrillator in, because when you have such a weak heart, you can have abnormal heart rhythm and you could die. And the guy's like not understanding, as like, you know, what do you mean by that? I was like, well, you know, you could have a rhythm that, you know, you die. So the defibrillator shocks you and brings you back to life. And then it's like, oh, okay, wait. And I thought he was going to ask me about the defibrillator. But he's not asking about the defibrillator. So you said I get a rhythm, and that rhythm is lethal, and I die? It's like, yeah, that's scary, Abuna. I was like, no, it's not. I go to heaven. What are you talking about? I was like, yeah, but I'm trying to save your life. And he was like, looks at me as like, you know what? Who told you my life was lost? And as if we gave this guy the way to heaven, the path to heaven. But he said, you know what? This is the best news ever, that I might get, you know, a rhythm issue, and I go to heaven. And he refused getting a defibrillator. He never got it. He said, you know what, God's will be, I don't even know if he's alive or not. But that's kind of like some of the stuff that you see was like, you know what, it's like, and you know, I remember we like bring the other Abunas. So literally here, hey, there's your dad. There's your dad, by the way, okay? So Dr. Michael and Usama and myself, so three cardiologists, trying to convince Abuna. We brought other two Abunas, okay? Trying to convince the guy to get a defibrillator, and the guy would not budge. I said, absolutely not. It's like, you know what, this is my ticket to heaven. So anyhow, that was the story. But you learn through this, not only how God works through you, but God works through your action. You know, this is one of the pictures provided by the students in Bolivia. So those two guys are some of the best guys you'll ever meet in your life. Ever meet in your life. You talk about role models. You know, Magid is a general surgeon, is probably one of the most skilled they ever find. He does about maybe 5 to 6 mission trips a year. You know, he's basically, whatever, you know, whenever he works, he makes an income. Whatever he doesn't make, it doesn't work, he doesn't make an income. He says like, you know what, I don't need to make that income. I don't need to. And I'll just go and do mission trips. There's never a mission trip that I've asked him, Magid, can you come with me? That he will never come. And then the other thing about him is that he is the embodiment of God and his, you know, when he provides a humble heart to a person who's extremely skilled. Samuel is, I know that a lot of people are laughing because they went so good. You know, Samuel was the leader of the trip to Bolivia. And it's amazing because this guy has one of the kindest hearts ever you'd see in your life. And at that time, they both had a patient that was really not doing too well, and they teamed up to do that. One of them is a surgeon, the other one is an OB/GYN. They teamed up to save that patient's life. It was one of the most amazing experiences, and I think this, whoever sent me this picture, I think it was one of the best pictures because they were communicating with so much passion. But this is the reality. You know what? You could do the same thing in your day-to-day practice, and it will not feel the same. It will never feel the same. You will do this in the mission field, and it will feel towards you the hand of God. The other thing, you get to mentor some lovely, lovely, great young people like you who come to these missions, and you excite them. You excite them too much. And you lose them. So, I don't know what you know, so over here is Ayman. So this is the cath lab in Bolivia. So we had some, I have to show this, John. That's like the process. You know, some long days there, but you know, I don't know what I'm explaining to John there, and it just comes out. But realistically, when you look at these trips, how amazing it is to have that link all the time when they're awake. There's no question, as you go in your life, whether it is in medical missions or in real life, you're going to have a very hard time making that balance between healing the masses and saving the one. It's a very hard balance. Because in your day-to-day practice, you're going to be pushed to see as many people as you can. But can you really give that attention to one? Can you serve that service of the Samaritan woman that Christ went for a full day without eating or drinking, just to serve that one person? For us, when we go to these countries, when I tell you a country about like Ethiopia, 80 million have only 5 or 6 cardiologists. Tell me about like trying to do something different. Try to save them. It's like, who are you going to save? When we ask them, okay, give us the list of waiting patients who are waiting for mitral valve, they give us a list of 3,500 patients. Okay? 3,500 patients. And then you get this just young girl, believe it or not, this girl is 19 years old. 19 years old. She weighs 70 pounds. She weighs 70 pounds. Why? Because of mitral valve stenosis, you cannot breathe, you don't grow, you can't eat, you can't walk. She was carried by her parents on their backs for almost 100 kilos because she cannot walk, and her parents cannot afford transportation. And they brought her to the university at that day and that, for that time. And we were just there. And it's like, I don't think it was anything special about us. I think it was something special about her. Why did God choose her versus the others? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. But all what I know in my heart is that, you know what? I could not help thinking about that time. I'm thinking about the masses, and God is thinking about this one. It's not up to me to decide who's that one. I remember one time in the very early missions that we went to, and we had planned, a full day schedule. And we said, you know what, we're going to do 100 cases. 100 cases. And we ended up, because of logistics all the time, you know what, we never get to that. And we did about like 40 cases out of those. And I was so frustrated because, you know what, I went back to Abuna and I said to Abuna, you know what, this really sucks. Because, you know what, we did only 40% of what we expected. And he said, George, you know what, you're thinking about it from a completely wrong perspective. Because from your side, you have accomplished 40%. From the side of the patient that you've taken care of, he has been or she has been treated 100%. They've been taken care of 100%. And you multiply that by 40. It's not up to me as a human being to make sense of why is it that. But it's sometimes up to me to give that attention to the one person that Christ sends me in their way to make a difference. That is the most amazing thing when you get to deal with these people. A lot of them were, gals who become a huge burden on their family. They never marry, they cannot do anything. Their parents just absolutely hate it because they're a burden on the family. And the moment that you cure, the whole family is part again in the game because you know what, she's cured. She can grow, she can have kids, she can be of economic help. So talking about restoration, that is restoring somebody. And there are many other examples. Where's John? There's John over here. Okay. So this was in Kenya. This is the new OR there. And talking about, especially, and this is one of the things you're going to see in the challenging parts, when do we become as a society smarter to make a difference when they're young? Okay. Part of the areas that we are very underrepresented is pediatrics. Because if you make a difference in curing a lot of these diseases when they're young, you've restored them. You've restored them. Partly compared to when you're curing them at the end, it never makes it. Honestly, we've seen the kingdom of heaven. The only reason why I'm coming to talk to you about this today is that I have personally, George, have witnessed the kingdom of heaven on earth. That is the only reason. I have seen when God has allowed His kingdom to come. I have seen when my prayers have been answered, thy kingdom come. I've seen it firsthand, and that's one of the biggest things that I'm hoping you guys will get to see. I remember when we were in Ethiopia, the first trip in Ethiopia was an eye-opener, and that's when, I was talking with the group downstairs, when did I start to feel the passion of like, you know what, there's far more to life than just working. It was that trip. That trip was literally 2 weeks after in Egypt. You guys remember the Maspero event when 30-something Copts were killed at that time. And when you go to Ethiopia, Ethiopia is a very complex country, very complex. They have a huge inferiority complex because one day they were a very, very glorious nation that has gone through a very hard time. Okay, they had a kingdom, they had a lot of resources, and because of political corruption, they lost a lot. But one day, that country was almost close to 100% Orthodox. Almost. It was the Orthodox kingdom. At this point, after 40 years, only half is Orthodox. And about maybe a quarter are Christian non-Orthodox, and another maybe quarter or less are Muslims. And the amount of conversion is just unbelievable. So when we went there, so the number of Muslims right now about 20 million. That is a sizable amount. And when we did our procedures, actually the first patients that we ever did were Muslims in the country, because we went to the university hospital and we said, you know what, we're ready to serve. Whoever comes, comes. And they were Muslims. And at that time, the Ethiopian TV, there are several Ethiopian TVs. There is the Amharic one, and then there is the Arabic one. The Arabic one is geared towards the Muslims, because they're the ones who speak Arabic. So this is an Ethiopian guy who's speaking to Ayman in Arabic. And one of the questions he asked Ayman during the interview, he asked him as follows: how come you guys are Copts, as Copts? Your fellow countrymen 2 weeks ago were killed. How come you have the guts and the heart to come and serve us and serve the Muslims here? Why? And it was a prime witness time for somebody like Ayman to talk about, like, you know what? The only reason was because of Christ's love inside us. We have no hatred, we have no revenge. It's only because of Christ's love inside us that we can come. And even my countryman was killed by someone from your faith. I would come and tell you, I love you and I will serve you, no matter what it takes. That was the kingdom of God. To me, that was the kingdom of God. When the Pope and the Abunas came and told us we're unable to get inside the country, we're unable to preach, we're unable to evangelize, we're unable to affect them from a Christian standpoint, our work was the priestly work. Our work was the evangelism. Our work was the introduction of the kingdom of God in that society. Our work was showing even the Christians there that we as Christians do care and love them. Because you know what? A lot of people now don't even believe in Christianity. Why? Because of the lack of feeling that they don't feel that anybody cares about them anymore. A lot of the conversions that are happening in Africa, by the way, Africa, we're losing it right and left. Right and left. The amount of conversions out of Christianity is horrible. The amount of conversions to Jehovah's Witness is unbelievable. You know, in Nigeria, every other house we went to was Jehovah's Witness. Okay? Why? Because they don't feel from us anything that we care about them. That's unfortunate. The kingdom of God was at hand when you go and see, you know, people like Mbabulis, Abuna Mina, and Abuna Elisha over there. And you see how much you learn. When I was telling you guys, like, I went around and I learned from these people and I got their experience. It is treasures that you keep for the rest of your life when you learn from them. Anyone who's gone to, you know, in Ethiopia, the same thing, but anyone who's gone to Bolivia, and you go and meet with, you know, Abuna with Amba Yusuf, and Abuna Anthony, Abuna Andros. You remember these guys. How can they not touch your heart? That is the kingdom of God, in my mind, on earth here. The kingdom of God, and this is a very important point, when God is going to give you the blessing one day to have a family and to have kids, you work as a unit. You work as a unit. I remember a lot of you guys said that to us in Bolivia. That one of the most things that stuck in your mind in Bolivia was, why would, you know, a group of professionals choose to take their family instead of vacation, take them over there? And a lot of you says, like, you know what, we were impressed just you're bringing your family, your kids. You got to do the same. A lot of us were talking downstairs about, you know what, how hard it is to keep a family in this day and age, a professional family, a very busy professional family in this challenging time, to keep it on track. The way to keep it on track is to always keep a reality check of what is your reference point, what is your standard point. Is it the image of God or the image of yourself? And honestly, part of going to these places is that you get your reference point shifted again back to God. You know what to compare with. You know what to compare with. When I'm in my practice, what do I compare with? The car, the Jaguar that is on my left side. Okay? Which I sold, by the way. So, you know, you compare with that because you're looking at what's next to you. When you go to these trips, okay, that is your reference point of what you're comparing with. So this is the trips for next year, for 2014. You can see we've got, you know, Ethiopia, Kenya, Bolivia, Ethiopia again, Egypt. This might actually turn also into Egypt as well. But the reality is that any one of you who wants to go any of these places at any time, you can go. Ethiopia may not be that easy because Ethiopia you have to arrange for the whole group to go, for the most part. But the first trip is coming up in March. Kenya and Bolivia, Kenya probably has your best chance to do good work there anytime. What is our challenges? How can we transition to a long-term impact? We're still in our infancy. We've been only doing this for about 4 or 5 years. As individuals and as a group. I was just telling some of the group downstairs that we have to make a commitment to ourselves that actually as a professional society to go and attend some of the conferences that are done by the Christian Medical Society to learn from others. Okay, we have to humble ourselves. You know what? We know nothing about this field. We know nothing about it. We have to learn from them. We have to commit ourselves to become professionally better, to learn from other societies how to do it. We have to learn how to choose the local provider to team up with. It's been very hard, especially for those, and this is one of the things that there's been a lot of pushback against medical missions lately. Why? Because they tell you, you go to do these medical missions just to get a pat on your back. You feel good about yourself. But have you really made an impact on the society over there? No. The only exception for that is that if you team up with a local provider. You empower that local provider. You make a difference with that local provider. For example, for us as Semana, we've made the commitment that any place we're going to go, we will make a project to fundraise between us, not in the church, between us, to supply a specific entity to that place. So for example, when we were in Bolivia, okay, we were able to fundraise between ourselves $30,000 to allow Sayyidina to help him to start building that second floor. Okay? When we went to Kenya, we also raised about $25,000 to help Sayyidina buy the endoscopy suite, the full new Olympus endoscopes. Okay? So that's something you're empowering the local group to do. How can we be transformed to a holistic care mission group? There's no question we've got far more talent than just us, whether it is in location, whether it is in talents. I can tell you, Mark, when he came with us to Ethiopia, in that trip, several of us didn't do anything because we were full of ourselves. Like, hey, I'm the cardiologist going in. Things broke down. We didn't work. We didn't work. The one person who worked the most at that time was Mark as a paramedic, as an EMT, because that specialty didn't even exist whatsoever in Ethiopia. He sat down with them, he sat down with the ER, went over the ACLS protocols, went with intubation, went over everything over there. We do not have that mindset yet to offer those services. One of the other places I was telling you about is that, physical therapist. If you get a fracture in Africa, it's almost like a death sentence. Why? Because they don't go to the doctor, it heals wrong, they don't do physical therapy, they become limited. When you're limited physically and you can't earn your living in the field, you're done. Economically, you're broke. So for physical therapists, we absolutely have a huge need for physical therapists over there. For those who are in public health, okay, like if I think I'm doing something by treating 10 cases of rheumatic heart disease when their mitral valve is already shrunk, okay, if you're a public health specialist and you can make a campaign in a village to treat people with strep throat with antibiotics appropriately, if you just teach them how to diagnose it and treat it, you prevent thousands and thousands and thousands of rheumatic heart disease from happening. We're not there yet. We're absolutely not there yet. And I think it's going to take some time for us to evolve. And you know what? It needs some dedication. That's why some of us are starting to study these things a little bit closer. I'm going to run out of this. How can we unite together? And I think this is a call for you guys tonight. As an organization, we are unable to get through to many professionals within the society, within the US and Canada. We're unable. Very few people actually know of what we're doing. And the one limiting thing for us to actually increase the number of trips is the number of people. We just don't have enough people to go to these trips. Most physicians would probably say 1 or 2 trips a year. But if we think that this database of 600 and an average trip is about 20 professionals, look at how many trips we can do a year. 30? Look at how many non-Christians would join us. We're nowhere close to that. Many different reasons, I'm not going to go through into details, but I think of you guys as a primary spokesperson. And one of the things we're going to talk about later tonight, what can you do? And I think one of the things you can do is have that vision of this organization, that this is your organization. I think if you talk to your colleagues, whatever they wanted to do, they were given the carte blanche, like, okay, go ahead and do it. If this is within the aim and the vision of the organization, go ahead. This is your organization. Okay, you don't need approvals and all that. You know, we've made it a case that this organization would be technically separated from the church in terms that it's not under any diocese, it's under the Pope. It is under the Pope. And we're meeting with the Pope to actually go over this in March. So this gives us kind of a little bit of flexibility of moving around different countries, different dioceses, using different resources. But how can you get the word out there, not just to the medical/dental/pharmacy, but also to everyone who wants to serve in this field? You know, I was talking to Rini in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. We have a huge logistics nightmare in terms of actually growing this mission, and we don't have anywhere to start. These are the website. You have it on the pamphlet, and these are the trips again. So I'm done at this point, and I hope with this 45-minute presentation, not necessarily to go over an exhaustive list of what has happened, but just to open your eyes and your hearts to what you could do going forward. Every one of you is going to go into your field of specialty and be trained to the best level you can. If you can come out of this retreat with two things, actually three things. Number one, what can you do locally? And we'll talk about that. Number two, do I have time and resources to make it to one trip abroad a year? It has a special flavor, no matter what. It has a beautiful special flavor. Number three, who can I talk to get them involved and get them excited about this? If you come out with those three things, I think you will accomplish something in this retreat. Okay? So at this point, I'm done with my presentations. I think that we can open it to Q&A, but also I want Mina and Mike to give you guys an idea about, you know, we're going to split after the Q&A to kind of talk more about sub-areas and how we're going to do, like, if people are interested to know more about these areas and what can you do in it. Okay, so let's start first. Any questions? I know there were some questions before the after the first talk. Yes, go ahead.
So in the first talk that you gave, you talked about how when you were in the process you felt like a slave, and you gave that image of being a slave. And then you started talking about how we have to be that incarnational type of position, or whatever health professional that we are, incarnate what we believe of Christ, the divine healer. So, but I guess, like, what I was thinking is that we are students of Christ and we are students of medicine, but we're also students of the system that makes us a slave. And I guess the way that I understood it is that you were able to live that incarnational way of healing after you lived out that slave period. But we as students, like, is there a way to bypass that, or is we just have to live through that and then get to that phase, or is there a way to do that as students in that slave, quote-unquote, process?
That's a great question, because when you're going to go through your life, you're going to find that there's certain times that things are forced upon you that you really don't have any control over, and other times things you have control over. When you look at actually the lives of people, and I've had many in my life that I've came across to, the problem that happens in them is not when they're in the phase of being under the system where they have to fulfill their requirements. It's when they're given authority. They become their own worst enemy. I'll give you an example. A couple things that we were talking earlier. We're talking downstairs in the dining area. When you're in med school, you've got a schedule. You've got to study. You've got to score well. You've got to do well. You know, because you want to go to the best residency you can. You want to get the best training opportunity. And I would absolutely tell you, for you, this is as if you're worshiping. Why? Because you got to use what God gave you to the best you can. You got to make it to the best residency, training spot, or best ever, you know, place to train on that God can give you. So you got to do your best.
Sorry,
Yeah.
You said, clarify what by best.
Put your best effort into it.
No, what do you mean by the best residency program for you?
Like, for example, if you are, you know, planning to go to internal medicine residency, okay, and knowing that you are an American grad, you'll probably get into but you'll get into an internal medicine residency, okay, just because you're an American grad, because there are a lot of foreign grads that don't have that ability. And you don't study, you don't score well on your boards, you don't do well, you don't get great stellar recommendation letters, you don't put your effort, you don't put your heart into it. You could have made it into one of the top 20 internal medicine training programs, make you a very competent physician, okay? But you said, you know what, I'm not going to put in the effort. And just, you know, fool around. And then you make it into just an average program. And then you decide on this average program is like, well, you know what, I want to subspecialize. And you try at that time to subspecialize, but because you went to an average program, you're done, you can't. But if you would have put in your dues and put in your effort, okay, you'd have gone to the top program, and that would have allowed you then to go to the next step. You've squandered a talent that God has given you, okay? And honestly, I tell people who are in med school as well as in residency, that is the time when God is testing you. Are you faithful with the little that you have? Because you have little time, you have little control, you have little everything, even sanity. But are you faithful with that? Are you faithful with that? Are you still, within this time period, not wasting your time on other stuff, or are you actually putting your time a little bit that you have with God? When you look at the parable of the woman that gave the mites, the 2 mites, okay? At that time, why was she blessed? Okay, why was she blessed? Because she gave out of what? Necessity. Necessity, not out of abundance. That's the difference. Okay? When you give out of necessity, God looks at that. When you are in med school or in residency and really have no time whatsoever to serve, but you've got one Sunday a month, and that one Sunday you went to church instead of just saying, you know what, I'm going to rest and just recover, I deserve it, and you decide to serve God that one Sunday out of the month, God is going to look at your faithfulness. You know what's going to happen after that? He's going to bless that faithfulness. He's going to keep inside your heart that faithfulness very, very alive. So now you come to the point where life in front of you is absolutely wide open. You make the decisions. That's when people fall. When people feel that, you know what, I've been suffering for all those years, I paid my dues, I've done the rite of passage, I'm at that point right now, I'm on top of the world. If you want to know that actually, so the average medical/dental/pharmacy student has about maybe $250,000 to $300,000 of debt, okay? Do you know after 3 to 4 years in practice where they're earning the big bucks, you know what's their average debt at that time? About $1 million to $1.5 million. When did they add on this debt? Right after they got done, and now they are actually making the big money. At that time, things are under your control. Your time is under your control. A lot of practices, when you're going to find, you know what, the practice, it depends, like, you know what, you're working more, you make more money. So people feel like, you know what, the sky's the limit. I can really make a ton of money here. And they always kind of give themselves excuses like, you know, well, if I don't make this money right now in my peak of the earning, the income potential, I'm never going to make it. But what do they do at that time? They end up working like a dog, and then they end up in a divorce, and they end up that their kids are completely embittered by that. And they end up that, you know what, their spouse takes half of their money anyway. Why is it that the divorce rate is going up like that? Okay, why is it? Because, you know, that's just a, you know, it's a simple fact. But if you're done, 2 things to kind of answer your question. If you're done with your time when you have limited control over your life, okay, be very careful in the choices and the options that you make after that. Be very careful with the group that you will join. If you see the group that all of them are working until 9, 10 o'clock at night, okay, if you see the group that all of them have been divorced once or twice in their life, if you see the group that, you know what, they're completely estranged from their family, usually when you're done with your residency and your fellowship and you go to these interviews, okay, a lot of them actually will bring their spouse, okay? And if you go to these interviews and you find none of them has their spouse with them, big red flag, big red flag. If you talk to them and you find it's like, you know what, none of them has a family life, okay, absolutely big red flag. It's your decision if you want to join this group. This group could be the best group in town, could be making the most money that you can even think of. But is that the right decision for you? The problem is that when you're done with your training, yes, in the past you had no control over that. Everything after your training is your decision, period. Everything after your training is your decision. The practice you join, the kind of physician that you would be, whether or not, you know what, you want to be full-time or part-time. I'll get into that a little bit. The kind of house you're going to buy. The kind of memberships you're going to join. The kind of vacation home you're going to buy, the kind of debt you're going to accrue to yourself. If you've laden yourself with debt, how are you going to get out of it? You have no control at that time, you're right. You have no control. You're going to end up working for about another 15 to 20 years to pay off that debt. The sad thing about our field right now is that a lot of people work about 15 years to pay off the debt, another 15 years to save for retirement, which is lovely. Isn't that great to live for that? But how did we get ourselves into this position? You all are going to graduate one day and you're going to sit down with a financial analyst, and the financial analyst is going to tell you, is going to try to convince you. Trust me when I tell you that. It's going to try to convince you that, you know what, your living expenses are going to be about $200,000 per year. And they're going to tell you because your living expenses are going to be $200,000 a year, you've got to save and invest money to make up that. So then if you live until the average life expectancy in the United States, which is about 78 years, you've got to work until you're probably about 65 and work full-time and save all this money. Really? Who makes that decision? Is it me or is it my financial analyst? Big difference. So be very careful of the decisions you're going to commit to once you're done with your training and your education, because they will change your life. Be very careful with it when you have a family. Be very careful with the decisions. You know what? Once you get into a relationship, sit down with your spouse and have a very, very honest talk about financial obligations. If you guys are not meeting on the same level, there's a big problem, because if your spouse demands from you certain financial obligations, that will drain you. You know what? Can we turn off?